Hello, and welcome to this pre-recorded feedback event for the June 2015 examination for the Next Generation BTEC Level 3 in Children's Play, Learning and Development, Unit 1, Children's Development. To help you get the most out of this feedback, you may want to have the following documents handy, as we will refer to them during the session. Here are the aims and objectives of today's session. You will receive feedback on performance of learners in the June 15 examination series. Consider questions where significant numbers of learners underperformed and possible reasons why. Discuss the lead examiner's report. Consider delivery strategies and share good practice. Address common issues. Find out about further support available. I am now going to introduce you to the assessment. Please open the Unit 1 specification document. As you can see, the unit is split into 5 learning aims. The June 2015 paper addressed all learning aims. The questions within the paper were spread across Level 2 and Level 3, Pass, Merit and Distinction. This is an example of Question 1, where learners did well, despite it being a negative question, and were able to provide 2 correct examples from the case study. For example, the second example links to the case study, where he uses short phrases and finds understanding basic vocabulary difficult. This question is straightforward, and learners demonstrated a good understanding of the normative age and stage of language development. Here is an example of a response to Question 2A, where learners did not do too well. There were 2 possible answers to this question. The learner has correctly identified use of blanket. Learners generally performed well on Question 1, as learners were able to provide correct responses, gaining maximum marks. Responses demonstrated learners had a good understanding of age and stage normative language development. Some learners failed to gain full marks. This may be indicative of learners not developing a deeper understanding of learning across the unit. Here is an example of Question 2B, which carries a total of 4 marks. Here the learner has gained full marks, as the learner has correctly identified factors in Philo's life that may affect his emotional development, and how this could manifest through his behavior. Here is a 2-mark example of the same question. You will see in the first example the learner has provided a correct factor. The parents are divorced, but has not been specific in providing a behavior. In the second example, the learner has provided a behavior, but not a factor in Philo's life. In summary, therefore, learners generally performed well on Question 2B. Most learners were able to identify 2 factors affecting the emotional development of Philo. Most learners were able to identify 2 factors to gain 4 marks. This is the first activity which provides you with an opportunity to mark a similar question to the ones that have already been discussed. Please use your mark scheme to award marks. You can pause the recording at this point to carry out the activity if you wish. This response has been awarded a total of 2 marks. 1 mark for identifying that Philo will not have so much contact with his father, and 1 further mark in the second example for his mother going back to work. Note that only 1 mark can be awarded in the first example, even though the learner has provided 2 reasons: divorce and inability to see his father. This is an example of question 3b. The question required learners to indicate 2 aspects of information processing theory, and for a further 2 marks, describe how the theory could be used to support George's numeracy skills. This is an example of a response that has gained 4 marks. Here is an example of a 2-mark response. In the first example, the learner has correctly identified an aspect of information processing theory, encoded, for 1 mark, but has not provided an example of how encoding can be achieved. In the second example, the learner has also identified an aspect of information processing, retrieve, but has provided no further example. To recap, many learners were able to provide correct responses, giving appropriate ways theory supports numeracy. Those learners who achieved fewer marks were able to identify an aspect of information processing theory, but not an appropriate example of how it is used or applied. Learners need to ensure they read questions carefully. To understand where 2 marks are awarded for a question, they should provide extensions and examples. Here is an example of question 4. Learners were asked to describe how Bruner's theory of learning may be used to support Philo's cognitive development. The majority of responses were only able to indicate some aspects of Bruner's theory. As a consequence, the overwhelming majority of learners could only access level 1 in the mark scheme, as there was no application. Learners attempted to apply the theory to the case study. However, only the more able learners were able to provide relevant examples of how the theory might be applied to supporting the cognitive development of a 4-year-old, to access marks in level 2 and 3 of the mark scheme. This response was awarded a mark in level 2. This response has been awarded marks in the level 1 range. This response illustrates how some learners were unable to make appropriate links to theory. Although the learner has correctly identified that Bruner coined the phrase scaffolding, their elucidation was vague and demonstrated an inability to successfully make links between theory, areas of development, and practice. Here is a further response to this question. The learner has again been awarded marks in the level 1 range. The response illustrates a basic understanding of Bruner's theory, but unfortunately, the learner has not been able to provide an appropriate explanation to gain further marks. To summarize, learners seem to struggle with this question. The majority of responses were only able to indicate some aspects of Bruner's theory. As a consequence, the overwhelming majority of learners could only access Level 1 in the mark scheme, as there was no application. Learners attempted to apply the theory to the case study. However, only more able learners provided relevant examples. Centers need to encourage learners to apply theories to given case studies, if they are to access the higher mark bands. Activity 2. Here is another opportunity for you to mark a similar question. This is a response to question 5. Using the mark scheme, in which level category would you award marks for this response? You can pause the recording at this point to carry out the activity if you wish. This question required learners to discuss how the teacher could support George using Bronfenbrenner's theory. This response was awarded marks at the high end of Level 2, as the learner has identified aspects of Bronfenbrenner's theory using correct examples. The learner has also provided examples of how teachers can talk to the parents and provide opportunities in the community and local environment. In summary, this type of question produced mixed responses from learners. For some questions, question 5, learners were able to provide good responses, making relevant links between theory and practice. In other questions, 4 and 6, learners struggled as they were unable to name theories or their ideas and link them appropriately to practice. Activity 3. Here is a further opportunity for you to mark a similar question. This is a response to question 6. Using the mark scheme, in which level category would you award marks for this response? You can pause the recording at this point to carry out the activity if you wish. Here, the learner was awarded a mark in Level 2. Some learners did not provide relevant material, as they were unable to correctly identify the theories. This may have been because the names of the theorists were not included in the question. Learners that were able to show understanding of the theories and apply them appropriately to George's behavior, as described in the case study, were able to access Level 2 and 3 mark bands. Learners need to ensure that they are able to link concepts to the theorists that proposed them. Here is an example of a response to question 7. This question required an explanation of what is meant by both growth and development. The majority of learners were able to identify one aspect of growth and one of development, but did not develop their responses to explain, which was needed for 4 marks. In this response, you can see the learner has correctly identified that growth can be measured and provided an appropriate link. Here is an example of the same question that attracted 2 marks. 1 mark for identifying that growth refers to increase in head circumference or height, and 1 further mark for identifying intellectual skills, which can be increase of knowledge. Here is a further opportunity for you to mark a similar question. This is a response to question 8. Using the mark scheme, How many marks would you award for this response? You can pause the recording at this point to carry out the activity if you wish. Question 8. This activity gained a total of 4 marks. The learner has correctly identified positive and negative reinforcement and provided appropriate examples in the form of praise and encouragement to promote positive behavior and negative, taking away something from a child. Note, although the learner has mentioned punishment, telling child off, they have stated taking away a belonging. In summary, on this type of question, successful learners were able to provide accurate definitions with appropriate examples, demonstrated sound understanding of concepts. Learners who did not do so well, though providing accurate definitions, were unable to make appropriate extensions or links. Demonstrated lack of understanding of what the question required. Referred to punishment as negative reinforcers. Learners need to understand the requirements of command words in the question to develop responses. Here are some of the common issues identified during this examination series. Learners' understanding of command verbs and requirements of questions. Learners not reading questions fully. Learners not providing examples to definitions, questions 7 and 8, or not providing appropriate examples to demonstrate understanding. Understanding of some theories, but inability to apply knowledge to case studies. Centres could make more use of practice papers, or write their own questions, to enable learners to understand requirements of command verbs and links between theory and practical application. Please note that this part of the presentation is dealing with the delivery of the qualification rather than the exam. I would now like you to consider delivery strategies and best practice. 1. Practical-based learning sessions using role play, for example. 2. Mapping or integrating units across the course. Although this can be an arduous task, it is proven to be beneficial in many centres. 3. Scenarios and contexts. Use these so learners get an idea of the different vocational scenarios. 4. Use of delivery guide. It is a useful document, but concentrate on each section of the specification. Use learner experience where possible and appropriate. 5. Group work. Learners can help each other understand topics. 6. Research. Look at the how and why, rather than just using. 7. Projects. 8. Exam techniques. Use this presentation and the lead examiner report to explain to learners the different exam techniques, especially where they might not be obvious when looking at a question such as explain, 1 mark for identification, 2nd mark for justification or expansion. 9. Enter learners when they are fully prepared, so they will be able to achieve the best mark possible. This slide includes details of where further support is available. This is the key web page for customers to be aware of for support and guidance with BTEC results. For further guidance and support with the delivery and assessment of BTEC, see our full training offer here. www.btec.co.uk/training. Any further questions to be directed to the Subject Advisor for Childcare, Rachel Southern. Thank you.